Bihari Kunjadeya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhare Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhare Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhare Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhare Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Vishnupad Astatarasata Sri His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki God Premanandi. Looks like a lot of Krishna Bhakti here in this house. So many nice paintings and So that's our discussion today. You know that, right? A very wonderful section of the Bhagavatam is Yugala Gita. This is the song of the Gopis, as it's following the section of the Rasa dance, which is 4 chapters, 29 to 33, and then there's this discussion of what the Gopis feel when Kṛṣṇa goes out the next day to tend the cows with the cowherd boys. They're feeling separation. And the chapter begins with one verse. They're speaking the message of Krishna's, as he's entering into the forest, he calls upon his flute. Mukunda is the name that they use to speak about him. And 3 things. He's announcing to the residents of the forest that I'm coming. And he's calling the cows. The second thing, the flute doesn't just make a sound, a musical sound, it calls the names of the cows. And it's announcing to the residents of Vrindavan, I'm going now. And so they're feeling the pangs of separation. And to deal with that vipralamba bhav, the feelings of separation from Kṛṣṇa, all day long together they sing of Kṛṣṇa's glories. Primarily it's centered around his flute, and not just what the flute does, but what the flute does to all the living entities in the Braja forest. First the cows, and then kind of in descending order, the other animals, the bulls and the peacocks and the this and the that, and how they become affected. They all go mad, hearing the sound of Kṛṣṇa's flute. And then the trees and the creepers, and the river, inanimate objects, the river and rocks, and it's all, when they hear the sound of Kṛṣṇa's flute, what happens? In the far distant place, there's lakes, and the water birds, they hear from a distance, and they become stunned, and it's like, they're just meditating on Kṛṣṇa in the form of his flute, and how it's affecting all of the residents of the forest, and then what to speak of themselves. So that's the picture, the setting. And we're going to be reading from 2 sections. Both are summarizing, so these verses, after the first verse, it's in pairs, 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7. The first verse is describing the flute and its sound, and then how other entities are affected by it. So, this set of verses, it's actually 2 pairs of 2, 8 through 12, 8 through 11, and our acharyas are going to go through them in pairs. So we're going to hear from 2 of our acharyas. One is Sanatana Goswami. Little background, Sanatana Goswami was, one could say, the chief. He's next in line of disciplic succession following Lord Chaitanya. So, you know who's Lord Chaitanya, yes or no? Not sure. You know who is Kṛṣṇa? So, Kṛṣṇa imparted the teaching of Bhagavad Gita, and the concluding teaching of Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharmam Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam. All of the teachings that fall under the category of Dharma, they're subordinate to this one. They're aiming at this one thing. What's that? Mam Ekam Sharanam. The benefit of elevation of consciousness is to come to that position. Take shelter of Kṛṣṇa alone. Mam ekam sharanam. And after Kṛṣṇa left this world, shortly thereafter, there's a little juncture of time, but the Kali Yuga began. And in Kali Yuga, it's known, it's just like winter season is very cold, especially in Chicago. And the Kali Yuga is as an age of mankind that good qualities are reduced, diminished like anything, more and more and more. And more turbulence, the age of quarrel, we've all noticed, over nothing. Some tract of uninhabitable land is now a potential national war between one great nation and another great nation over uninhabitable land. So, age of Kali. So, Kṛṣṇa began to consider, well, although I gave the means to achieve the goal of life in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, but who is there in this age that's going to understand how to do that? So there must be some further instruction how to surrender to Kṛṣṇa, take shelter of Kṛṣṇa, give oneself fully to Kṛṣṇa. And I could send someone or I could empower some teacher, but the very best is if I come myself and teach. And so that's who was Lord Chaitanya. Kṛṣṇa, coming in the mood and even the complexion of his devotee Radha, because Radha's complexion is golden, like molten gold. So Lord Chaitanya appeared not blackish, like Kṛṣṇa, but in a golden complexion. Gauranga is another name, golden limbs, Gauranga. And in Radharani's mood of how to offer loving service to Kṛṣṇa. And he gave the chanting of the holy names, as it's told in the scripture for this age of Kali, as the principal Yuga Dharma, means for spiritual perfection, chanting God's name. It's not only within the Vedas, in all religions, there are books written illustrating how in all religious teachings emphasis is given to singing and praising and hallowing God's name in all religions. So it's the Yuga Dharma. And along with Yuga Dharma, he gave teachings in how to take shelter and give oneself in dedicated way to the personality of Godhead, Bhagavad Gita's message. And chief of the associates or followers of Lord Chaitanya were the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, very celebrated person, Shad Goswami from the Vrindavan area. And if you visit Vrindavan today, you'll see many of the temples that they established and the influence of Kṛṣṇa Bhakti through the generations, starting with Lord Chaitanya. So chief amongst them is Sanatana Goswami, and he wrote commentary on the verse. So I'm going to be reading his commentary on these 4 verses. Canto 10, chapter 35, text 8 through 11. So I'll just read and we'll discuss a little bit. Anything that hopefully at the end when we're done just some exchange, some thoughts you have, some questions you have, stimulate some discussion so that the people that are online can send in a text message. And so the spotlight's on all of you right now. When the cows begin to perspire, they leave the bank of the river on lower ground and proceed to an unseen place more elevated, covered with thick forest, grazing on grass with joy in front. He calls them with his flute. What to speak of the rivers, the previous verse was speaking of the rivers, hearing the flute. What to speak of the rivers with their presiding deities being attracted, the moving beings and even immobile creepers and trees develop special bhavas on hearing the flute. That is explained in 2 verses. That's 8 and 9. His powerful activities, viryani, are described continuously or after calling the cows in a complete manner, expressing their affection for him through relating his pastimes by his followers with whom he constantly moves. So this is the Gopis speaking of Kṛṣṇa. He is like Narayana, Adipurusha Iva, and has fixed wealth. By wandering in the forest, he experiences the highest joy. Or he has fixed beauty. He wanders in the forest, vana chara, since he cannot see the cows. He wanders on uneven ground, on the slopes of hills, and becomes tired. Then he, the best of cowherds, expert on the flute, calls the cows using his flute. Even all the creepers and trees develop bliss, though they lack skill in love, being elements of the forest. Even the trees, though male, develop bhava. He calls cows by their name. These cows have names of creepers. Oh, Malati. Oh, Malika. Oh, Vashanti. Oh, Utika. The trees and creepers, confusing the names, develop bhava. He's calling the cows and they think he's calling them. The trees flow with honey. It is as if Vishnu, who spreads everywhere, was within them. Thus, this is only an analogy, since it would be inappropriate to conclude that Kṛṣṇa was the Lord, for the Gopis to make that conclusion. The trees and creepers became full with flowers and fruit. The external wealth is an external symptom of the presence of Vishnu. Paragraph, because of the presence of Vishnu, their bhava is suitable, expressed as a wealth of fruits and flowers. Because of Vishnu's presence, the branches bow down. The branches are like hands holding ingredients of worship, bending low. The branches appear to be offering obeisances, with the tips of the branches bending low. The bark seems to burst, with hairs standing on end. Paragraph. Though the flow of honey is a symptom of prema, the hairs standing on end is an occasional condition, though natural to creepers. This indicates outstanding prema. The trees release honey profusely and constantly. Paragraph. The boys express their affection for Kṛṣṇa by accompanying him and praising his actions. The creepers and trees, out of envy, desire to express their affection for the Lord and thus offer their fruits and flowers. How did the boys praise Kṛṣṇa? He was like Narayana. But then, how to describe the joy of Gokula? It is much more. And this is because he has wealth or Lakshmi at all times. Like a great treasure, Kṛṣṇa does not reveal his qualities publicly. Thus he is only like Narayana. The creepers are mentioned first since they are female, like the Gopis, with similar bhavas. The bushes shower streams of honey, or the bushes having streams of honey shower prema. They distribute prema to persons in the past and present by their condition. The following should be said. The devotees of Kṛṣṇa are endowed with wealth and birth resembling flowers and sons resembling fruits. They are endowed with karmas described in the Vedas dedicated to material gains, which resemble flowers, and with material enjoyment in this and the next life, resembling fruits. The bushes are similarly endowed with fruits and flowers, but are endowed with humility and other good qualities. Thus, they bow down along with their family members. They manifest the Lord who shines in the self, spreading as the unlimited cause, externally and internally on hearing the song of Krishna's flute. Though they try to hide this, they are unable to hide this because strong prema has appeared. Their hairs stand on end, and they shed tears, just as those who shed tears of prema spread prema to the people, so the shrubs flowing with honey spread prema. The word iva indicates that they try to hide the manifestation of the Lord. Paragraph. So time has passed, he's entered the forest, and now, as noon approaches, having entered the forest, Kṛṣṇa gives up the wrestler's dress that was described in the previous chapter. His mother decorates him very nicely, and as soon as he goes into the forest, he puts on forest things, make him look like a wrestler. And then it's nude time, and he changes his costume or his attire. Kṛṣṇa gives up the wrestler's dress and dons special clothing. By the soft, sweet sound of his flute, he enchants the birds inhabiting the water bodies, even though they are far away. This is explained in 2 verses. So that's 10 and 11. As the son of Nanda, best of devotees, he wears beautiful Vaishnav tilak made of gaurika, which is red oxide. We discussed this. Minerals from natural minerals. So a red oxide is known as gaurika, and he would make tilak. The fragrance of the tulsi is the very nature of the tulsi. The bees, sensing the fragrance, sing loudly with long notes. On hearing the song of the bees, Kṛṣṇa puts his flute to his lips out of joy to imitate their song. Adriyan, or respecting. Without covering the bees' song, he plays the flute softly and sweetly. As soon as he places the flute on his lips, the song arises. Sandita Venuhu. His lips are mentioned because they are most attractive. Paragraph. All the birds in the water, such as the chakravakas, cranes, and swans, become attracted to the song. These birds are mentioned because they inhabit the water. Sarasa means things related to bhakti, and Hamsa means a person with high intelligence, like the swan, that can separate milk from water. The birds are attracted to that song and approach Kṛṣṇa, famous for his attractive nature, Harim. The birds are innumerable and inclined to play happily. Charu, or beautiful, can modify Gita, the song of Kṛṣṇa's flute. So they're hearing this beautiful flute song. Thus the birds approach with movements of prema and worship him with devotion. Paragraph. The method of worship is described, along with the characteristics of having their hearts stolen. The external and internal senses concentrate only on him. Yata chitta. The closed eyes represent all the knowledge senses, or just their eyes. They stop speaking. This indicates that all the action senses have stopped functioning by the destruction of agitation, or the eyes can represent all the limbs. Mental, physical, verbal action all stop. Or, seeing his form, they develop the highest prema and they faint. The cranes, living in the water like sages, such as Saubhari, come to the Lord thinking he is affectionate to the most fallen on hearing his flute. So it's Saubhari. You know the story, Saubhari Muni? Some of you do and some of you are not so sure. Okay. It's a story in Vrindavan, in Braja. Well, is there a longer version and a shorter version? The short version is he heard that Vishvamitra Muni, a great sage, was agitated by Menaka's ankle bell, so he didn't want to get disturbance. So he meditated underwater. No cheating when you're meditating underwater. You stop the prana, just becomes suspended. But underwater, he saw a male and female fish enjoying together, and his mind became agitated and his meditation broke. So Saubhari Muni is a celebrated sage that proficient in meditation underwater. And it took place in Vrindavan. Here's a little bit longer story. You're familiar with the Kaliya serpent, yes? Kaliya serpent, okay. So Kaliya previously was with a group of other serpents who inhabited the Ramanaka Lake. And it's said at the end of that whole pastime that Ramanaka Lake was a place in Fiji. So Garuda went to the place where the snakes were, because that was his food. So they made a truce. Once a month, they would make a sacrifice of snakes and some other sacrifices so Garuda would not harass them. So one time it was Kaliya's responsibility, but he was very envious. So instead of making the sacrifice, he came and took the sacrifice for himself. And Garuda became very angry. So he started chasing Kaliya. And Kaliya went, and wherever he went, Garuda followed him. So he went to Vasaki and said, what to do. And he said that there's one place that Garuda won't go. And that's in the Kaliya Hrada, this lake where Kaliya went. Because one time when Saubhari Muni was doing his meditation in that lake, Garuda came to catch some fish. And when Garuda came to catch fish, Saubhari cursed Garuda, "You don't come here again, or if you do, you'll instantly die. So you go to that place, Kaliya, and you'll be safe." So Kaliya took that advice, and he went to the Kaliya lake. And on the basis of Saubhari Muni's curse, Garuda wouldn't come there, so he could hang out and do his thing. So his enviousness spanned over a long period of time, and as a result, the lake became poisonous because of his enmity and envy and his poisonous nature. The whole lake became poisonous, and Kṛṣṇa came and corrected it. So that's the Saubhari story. The cranes living in the water, like sages such as Saubhari, come to the Lord thinking he is affectionate to the most fallen on hearing his flute. They become intoxicated with the sound and are not in a fainting state in the beginning. On hearing the sweet song of the flute, mixed with the humming of bees, thinking Kṛṣṇa favors entities with wings, they approach him with attention. Then, on seeing his beauty, they faint in prema. Paragraph. Tracing out the thief by signs, they approach and see his deceitful behavior. Out of fear and dismay, they cannot speak or do anything. They close their eyes and remain by his side. So that's those 4 verses. There's one other session, that's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He lived in Vrindavan in the mid to late in the early 1800s, I think, around that time, and was a very prolific writer and wrote many commentaries on the scripture. One of them was a commentary on the Bhagavatam. So we're reading his commentary on 10:35, 8 through 9, and then 10 through 11. So the previous text was speaking about the rivers hearing Krishna's flute. It is natural that the rivers should react in that way because, although they are unconscious, they are eternally perfect beings in the form of demigods. But just see how even the most dull entities like trees, who have taken a low birth due to their previous karma, relish transcendental mellows from hearing Krishna's flute. In this way, another group of gopis spoke. Paragraph. Although Kṛṣṇa is endowed with unchanging opulence, achala vibhuti, similar to Narayan, Adi Purusha Iva, nonetheless, he, Kṛṣṇa, wanders through the forest with his cowherd boyfriends because of his affection for the living entities dwelling there. Then we had some discussion in the evening session. We're reading chapter 11 from Canto 10. It's where the cowherd men have a little meeting and they decide to leave Gokul, cross back the river Jamuna towards Mathura, but north of Mathura because they didn't want to deal with Kamsa, and reside in the Vrindavan forest. So there was some question like, why does Kṛṣṇa want to go there? Everything happens in this world, well, certainly in the spiritual world, everything happens by Kṛṣṇa's sanction and his desire. His Satya Sankalpa Shakti, his desire. Then everything starts to flow. His energies move and living entities move and things happen according to his plan. So why did he want to go to Vrindavan? Here's the answer. He has eternal associates that are in that forest, and he wants to give his association to them, just like he's doing here, entering into the forest, playing upon his flute. And they're reciprocating. They're being inspired and enlivened by his presence. So read the sentence again. He wanders through the forest with his cowherd boyfriends because of his affection for the living entities dwelling there. At that time, just as householder Vaishnavas and their wives become ecstatic when they hear a Sankirtan party approaching and offer obeisances, similarly, the creepers of the forest, who are female, and the trees, who are their husbands, bow low with their branches and vines, as if revealing Lord Vishnu within their minds. They weep abundant tears in the form of streams of honey. The trees appeared beautiful, rich with flowers and fruits. The flowers represent the sanchari bhava of joy. This is some technical terminology here, a whole paragraph of, without giving the definitions of all these things, these are states of ecstatic love. So the flowers represent a certain sanchari bhava, that of joy, and the fruits represent sthayi bhava, called rati. Their completely bent branches indicate the anubhava of paying obeisances. Anubhava is a term that means when there's ecstasy inside, there's some behavior outside that identifies what's the ecstasy inside. So their anubhava of just hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they're bowing down, paying obeisances. The statement that the filaments on their trunk and vine stand erect out of ecstatic love indicates the sattvika bhava of romancha. Romancha is hair standing on end. So they're symptoms of certain states of bhava are being demonstrated in these texts. That's what's being said. And then the final two. After describing the Vaishnava status of the trees and creepers, like that of Grahastha devotees who are still attached to the pleasures of household life, the Gopis describe the swans and cranes as self-satisfied sages, Atmaramas, worshipping Vishnu upon hearing his flute. Kṛṣṇa wore attractive tilak markings, darshaniya tilak, made from red mineral clays. The phrase can also mean that Kṛṣṇa is like the tilak, and all extremely beautiful persons worth seeing, the tilak of all extremely beautiful persons worth seeing. Kṛṣṇa wore a Vaijayanti flower garland with flowers of 5 different colors, interspersed with divinely fragrant tulsi, whose honey was sought by greedy bees, humming loudly, Alangu Uchai, due to intoxication. There may be an objection. Usually, lotus, jasmine, and naga keshara flowers are described as fragrant by ordinary people. Though the glories of Tulsi are much greater, she is not normally considered an especially fragrant plant. The objection is answered as follows. Ordinary people cannot perceive Tulsi's fragrance, but early in the morning, spiritually advanced persons can experience her fragrance as greater than that of the lotus. The bees, who are privileged to swarm about the flower garlands on Krishna's neck, certainly appreciate this fragrance. Actually, the most sublime fragrance of Tulsi is only fully appreciable to the supreme, excellent, and most perfect sense of smell of Krishna himself. By the covering of Yogamaya, Tulsi's fragrance cannot be appreciated by anyone else. Paragraph. The Bhagavatam explains that the most fragrant plants in Vaikuntha also appreciate the special qualifications of Tulsi Devi. This is Canto 3, Chapter 15. It reads, although flowering plants like the Mandara, Kunda, Kurubaka, Utpala, Champaka, Arna, Punaga, Nagakeshara, Bakula, Lily, and Parijata are all full of transcendental fragrance. They are still conscious of the austerities performed by Tulsi, for Tulsi is given special preference by the Lord, who garlands himself with Tulsi leaves. The word abhishtam, or desirable, indicates that when Kṛṣṇa thought about what pitch he would play on his flute, the bees would buzz, and Kṛṣṇa would thankfully acknowledge Adrian, saying, excellent, excellent, my dear bees. I see this is the correct note, and play his flute according to that pitch. He's reciprocating so perfectly with all living entities. The word sandita venum means that Kṛṣṇa placed his flute firmly upon his lips. The melody emanating from that flute was certainly the most enchanting of sounds, as the Gopīs describe in this chapter. Hearing that sweet song, the water birds left the lakes, approached Kṛṣṇa, and worshipped the Lord by looking at him, listening, and meditating upon him. The word milita drisha, they closed their eyes, indicates the birds were absorbed in the rapture of relishing rasa. Closing one's eyes due to relishing transcendental mellows is another anubhava, a sign of ecstatic love for Kṛṣṇa. Premananda shared something with me. You certainly know who well. Those of us that are regulars at the temple, we know who Premananda is. She's formerly in a medical profession, now retired, and she's the president of our center in Naperville. So she shared with me this is her favorite section of the 10th Canto Bhagavatam. She wakes up in the morning, she knows the verses by heart, and she wakes up in the morning and as she's going about her, brushing her teeth, and she sings and recalls the phrases. It's, there's a happiness in hearing about and meditating and remembering the effect of Krishna's association. In this case, the whole chapter is just his flute, Krishna's flute song. Sometimes it's translated like that. And the effect of Krishna's flute with all the living entities as he moves about Vrindavan. Vrindavan is Krishna's eternal home. We've been describing like this, that there's prakat and aprakat lila. There's pastimes that are manifest once in a day of Brahma, where everyone can see, worldly people even can see. Kamsa can see, and Shishupal can see, and the demons that come to kill Krishna, they can see. But they don't have the transcendental vision to understand the nature of Krishna. But nonetheless, he makes his pastimes manifest, and that's what we're hearing about. And the purpose of his making those pastimes manifest is for those living entities. This is described in Canto 1, Bhagavatam. For those living entities that are in the mode of goodness, he brings them back to Godhead by his stimulating their ecstatic love for him. And those that are not, those that are in darkness and ignorance modes, he cleanses them by the sound vibration of his pastimes, hearing them, remembering them, seeing them in beautiful pictures like your painting as we walked in the front door here. And just to remember Kṛṣṇa like that, Kṛṣṇa appears for the benefit of conditioned souls and to bring the elevated souls back to his eternal abode. And when he makes those appearances, that which is otherwise unmanifest during the rest of the day of Brahma, aside from that one yuga cycle when he appears, they manifest for external vision. The creepers and the trees and the this and the that. We heard this nice description, very, very elaborate description of Vrindavan before Kṛṣṇa went there. That one of the things he was looking forward to was seeing Govardhan and seeing the river Jamuna. And there's this long description, very lengthy description of Bandiravan. The Bandira tree was huge, and Bandira tree was very devoted to Kṛṣṇa. And when Kṛṣṇa's pastimes concluded, there's a verse in Vishnu Purana that says, I can't maintain my existence, he just disappeared. So he went into his aprakat stage, the unmanifest stage. So these are not imagination. It's the sound vibration of the amala pramana, the spotless means of knowing transcendence. How are we going to know transcendence? Or how are you going to know that which is beyond the senses and beyond the mind? Well, using the senses and the mind, you're not going to. It's not just you're restricted. It's just they don't have reach. They don't have access to transcendence. So transcendence has to reveal itself. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the nature of transcendence, the whole of the spiritual realm, the Vaikuntha realm and Ayodhya and Krishna Loka, it's all revealed along with so many other subject matters. The process of creation and subcreation and so forth and so on, duties of mankind. How to live one's life that's aligned with Dharma and reaching to and touching transcendence. And by that method of sound vibration, one can connect with transcendence. So what it's like, it's beyond our imagination, but it's something that's knowable through sound. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned before, he very much appreciated this Srimad Bhagavatam, and he very much appreciated the love of the residents of Vrindavan as the highest form. And amongst the residents of Vrindavan, the love of the Gopīs for Kṛṣṇa is the highest form of transcendental love for the personality of Godhead. So he wanted to distribute bhakti by the chanting of the holy name, but even specifically to come to the stage of Braja Prem, love for Kṛṣṇa as the residents of Vrindavan experience it. So that's what we're in the becoming purified stage, just by hearing this wonderful description of the residents of Vrindavan as they are receiving Krishna's association and how they respond, how their hearts and their bodies respond to Krishna's association. So let's see if there's some discussion.
I don't have a question. I think it is just some collection of thoughts that I would like to share. When I started hearing this section of Kṛṣṇa going to the forest and the Gopīs are remembering, I was thinking that there is so much trouble. It's a silly thing I was remembering that, so much trouble in remembering. Why not they can convince their parents and just go to the forest and see all the pastimes and experience. But then after listening to classes consistently, I'm thinking that the Gopīs are experiencing more than what is experienced by the birds and the bees and the trees, just by discussing and remembering away from in separation and relishing that. And that is what the Srimad Bhagavatam is giving to us. And if we are also reading in that mood, that is what our acharyas are also presenting the commentaries, that if we read in that mood, we will also experience the same. If we are fortunate, is what I was thinking.
To say the same thing you're saying in different language, Lord Chaitanya's teaching is that love and separation is even stronger than love and meeting. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, there's the English saying. So the Gopīs in the evening, they were with Kṛṣṇa, performing rasa dance. And during the daytime, they were hankering for Krishna's association, and the intensity of their affection was even greater during the daytime. Now they're appreciating the mercy that Krishna is giving to all so they're not envious of them, but they're hankering for his association and relating to how they're feeling as they hear Krishna's flute. Several places it's stated that because of the intensity of their meditation upon Krishna, the mind concentrated upon Krishna throughout the day, it is as if he would appear, it's called this Sanskrit term spurti, he would appear before them. But it's not, it was so, Krishna is attracted by love. I mean, we're attracted by love because we're part and parcel of Krishna. He's attracted by the love of the residents of Vrindavan, and therefore he stays with them eternally. Even when it appears that he goes to Mathura, etc., he stays with them eternally in their hearts. He's with them. So they see him. There's this, mainly for those that are our hosts here. There's this nice description of Dhruva under the instruction of Narada. He engaged in a meditation process with severe austerities and chanting of his mantra, etc. And by his concentration, he saw the Supreme Lord Vishnu within his heart, because that was the worshipable object that he wanted some benediction from, Lord Vishnu. And because his absorption in meditation was so intense, the flow of life air was stopped, and the flow of air within the whole universe was also checked. So the demigods became choked up, and they went to Lord Vishnu. We can't breathe, help. So he said, don't worry, he's just a little boy. He's doing austerities, and I'll stop. So he came before him. So the acharyas say, in the case of Dhruva, it was a two-step. In the case of the gopis, there wasn't a two-step. They were feeling absorbed in thought of Krishna with such intensity of love that they were seeing him in front of them. Not like there was the thought of him and then suddenly. So they're absorbed. The absorption of Dhruva is incredible, and the absorption of the gopis is more incredible. And the reciprocation, because the absorption in their case was simply out of love. Dhruva, at least initially, was, I want a kingdom. And the position of the gopis was they didn't want anything other than Krishna's association. So the intensity of their love is honored, and what they're experiencing, even though they're in this mood of separation, they were feeling his presence. They're lamenting, yet that's a type of ecstasy. It's not a lamenting like worldly people lament. Oh, I lost my wealth, or something. That's the worldly kind. Their kind is a transcendental kind. That's an ecstasy. There's lots of mysteries, but that's one of them. Yes, so confirm what you're saying. They already abandoned the bond of convention that civilized people observe, what to speak of religious people observe. The bond of convention, of dharma, religious convention, religious duty. They went beyond it. And Krishna knew that, their total dedication to him in love. So, thank you for that comment. Something else?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. One question. The scriptures say that the human birth is very rare. Durlabho manusho deho dehinam kshanabangura. So I'm assuming that the birth of Kamsa and all the demons are human, but they were demoniac.
Yeah.
So the trees and the creepers and the bees and birds, they get attracted to Krishna and Krishna's flute. Why not these demons? Why they weren't? Even though if you consider them as a higher birth, they were not. Whereas it's being neutral is more positive than offensive is.
Well, there you go. The birth isn't a determination of higher or lower. The higher or lower has to do with the Sura and Asura, or divine and demoniac, the regard that one has for the Supreme. So their regard for the Supreme is most elevated. And the regard of Kamsa was most the opposite.
When you said their regard is elevated, you meant the trees and the
All the denizens of Vrindavan have affection for Krishna. So their life form may not be, by worldly sense, an elevated life form. But by a transcendental sense, their affinity for Krishna is superlative compared to those that are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Birth-wise, being more elevated. He was in not only human form, he was in a Kshatriya family. His father was the king. So instead of waiting to become king, he put his father in jail and took over the throne. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hearing these lectures, you also mentioned just now to Vibhu Chaitanya Prabhu's question about lamentation. We can see that there is lamentation and hankering in these pastimes.
Yes.
And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Na shochati na kankshati."
That means the material kind.
That material, yeah, that's what my question is. So that's the material, and here it's spiritual.
Yes.
Another question is, we see a lot of time pictures of Krishna, deities of Krishna with red tilak, red color. Is it because of this red mineral?
I think it has to do with tradition more than scripture. One tradition, tilak looks like this. Another tradition, tilak looks like that. It's more to do with the tradition than, Krishna's pastimes in the afternoon in Vrindavan. That's my sense. How the tradition started, why this instead of that or something. Just different markings that indicate different groupings. Anything from our hosts or hostess? Anything at all?
Very happy that Maharaja, you are here. I'm very happy.
I'm happy that Bhagavatam is here. And sharing Bhagavatam with you, that's the happiness. Okay. No pressure, but I do want to invite you to share anything, ask anything. Here, she's got something. No? Okay. All right. Go ahead. We have some online?
No, Guru Maharaj, no questions online.
Okay.
I had just one question. Kaliya offended Garuda in one sense, but still he got the mercy of Krishna. So,
I'm listening.
so that, like we say, Vaishnava offense, it's very difficult to get the mercy of the
Yeah.
Lord. So, just had that thought when you mentioned today about that episode of Kali.
Well, the wives of Kaliya say the same thing you just said. Great as transcendentalists, aspiring transcendentalists, they desire like anything to get touch with the lotus feet of Krishna. And our husband did so many bad things, was so envious. And he got such mercy. And it wasn't just like with the serpent that was swallowing Nanda Maharaj. It was just one touch with Krishna's left foot and he was liberated. Kaliya got smashed and smashed and smashed. And he was really a hard case. But then became relieved of that enviousness. So it was Krishna's mercy. In many different forms, but specifically that Kaliya got, the mercy that he got was very special. So what was the reason for that? One can say causeless mercy, or one can say that the wives of the Kaliya serpent were quite different than he was, and because of their devotion, he got the mercy because of their devotion. That's another explanation. And it's just the nature of his compassion. Like with Putana, she came to kill him. He gave her a position in the spiritual world. Not just merging Sayuja Mukti, but so he has different aspects to his personality. Karuna is the word that's used, mercy, and he exhibited mercy. He doesn't have to have a reason. But the wives of the Kaliya serpent.
So, deducing from that logic, Guru Maharaj, so the prayers of Vaishnavas are very powerful.
Yeah.
So we can request devotees to pray for us, and we in turn pray for them.
Yeah. Prayer is powerful. And more pure, the more powerful the prayer. Online question. I think the timing is probably what threw people off. Yeah.
Sri Radhika Mataji's question. During yesterday's class, you spoke about making distinctions between principles and details, and that some things are in the gray area. As we mature in Krishna consciousness, will the ability to be comfortable with gray areas and make independently thoughtful decisions come?
Well, I didn't say across the spectrum of decisions, it's gray, what's a principle, and what's a detail. That's not what I said. But the question was a specific question about extending the bhakti message to people. Is it, to be suitable for the modern times? Should the form of extending bhakti be according to the modern times? Or, so there's a debate amongst those who are conservative persons and those who are liberal persons, and that where the line goes can be considered gray. That is, the liberals say this and the conservatives say that, and they don't agree, they disagree, and they sometimes get upset with one another. So it's not just, it's a peaceful disagreement. Sometimes it gets a heated disagreement. But that's nothing new. Heated disagreements is nothing new. And so back to her question. In the case where it's not so clear, where it is a gray matter, a gray subject, like let's just say something that's not gray. Just to, I heard Srila Prabhupada speaking in it was a recording, 1966 in New York, and he was explaining the principle of making offerings to Kṛṣṇa. Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati. So his point during this, because it was the audience, it's not like you can only offer Indian food to Kṛṣṇa. That's not what he says. You offer patram pushpam palam toyam. So foods that are in that category, you can offer those to Kṛṣṇa. So that's a principle, and the detail is it can be this, it can be that, it can be the other thing, but it has to be consonant with that principle. There's what's it called in the secular world? Conflict mediation and resolution, CDR. What is it called? Conflict resolution. So the person that there's a devotee, Brajabihari, he went to college and got a master's degree in that field. Now he does this for the U.S. government, Department of Interior. He lives in Washington. But within ISKCON, he has this seminar, he calls it Pizza and Pakoras. Some people say, you can't offer pizza. Where do you read about everybody offering pizza to Kṛṣṇa in the Bhagavatam? Where is it? And if you don't find it, you can't do it. That's the conservative. So, just back to principle and detail. The principle is something that's unchanging, and the detail is time, place, circumstance. So where you draw the line, specifically to the topic we were speaking about yesterday or the other day, is, there's not consensus on that one. So now back to her question. Yes, it's not easy. Sometimes we're not so clear. Am I still to be, appropriate for time, place, and circumstance? Am I deviating from principle in order to be, up with the times or relevant and relatable, etc.? Where does engaging things in Krishna service turn into I'm being engaged by the material energy instead of Krishna service? The Yukta Vairagya principle, using things in service to the Supreme, if we don't have the proper spiritual qualification, we can just get drawn into the material energy and become overwhelmed and bewildered. So I'm not sure that answers her question, but there's some thoughts on what she said.
Question from Kasturi Manjari Mataji. How can we increase our receptivity for mercy?
How can we increase our receptivity for mercy? Well, one of the ways is you try to do things on your own and you realize you can't. Try to do spiritual things and you realize you can't. You can't be spiritually successful without mercy. But you'll realize it more you try. Just like, for example, try to chant with full attention, where your mind doesn't waver. And you can't. Try and keep trying and trying and trying. On your own, you can't. You need mercy. And try. I just got this 2 days ago. I got a letter from one of the translators in China, and she struggles maintaining her chanting. So she shared, struggle, struggle, struggle. I finally threw my hands up in the air and say, and then almost immediately I felt this contentment and peace and tranquility and the sense of connection for the whole period of my chanting. It was just the most amazing experience. So effort is something that we need, and when you make sincere effort, as she was doing, or we might do, then you realize it's not sufficient. I need mercy. And you open your heart more for mercy when you realize, I can't do this on my own. I can't use the same material formula of, do it. The Nike, just do it. That doesn't work with spiritual principle. Behind you.
So, if we all have, or if we all are part of Lord Krishna, or any other God, then why is it that some people have a much easier time on this earth versus others? Their life are more painful.
Their life is more peaceful?
More painful.
Painful.
Some have peaceful life, while others from birth have a painful life. Why is that?
I think you know the answer. Sadasad, you have a Bhagavad Gita in the house? Later you can look up chapter 13, text 22. The answer is there. Karanam, I'll say in Sanskrit and then explain. Karanam Gudasangosya Sadasad Yoni Janmasu. Karanam is the causation rule. Guna Sangha, the association with the modes of nature. Karanam Gudasangosya Sad Asad Yoni Janmasu. Our good fortune and ill fortune arises from Guna Sangha. The cause of misfortune is associating with lower modes of nature. The cause of good fortune is associating with higher modes of nature. So, if today, let's say I'm born in a family that has, comforts of life, that has something to do with my past guna sangha choices. The cause is guna and karma. So today, I'm creating my destiny by choices I make today. My circumstance could be more fortunate or less fortunate. That's given already, whatever it is. Now I have the opportunity to make choices.
Follow-up question. So, if I make a mistake in this life, why don't I get punished in this life?
Well, there's no, you may or you may not. It's not a time-bound, it's a principle, but it's not time-bound. Some may span over a minute, an hour, etc., etc. It can be instant karma or delayed karma. And aside from karma is choices of association. Supposing someone, just take something out of the air. Someone has a tendency to be a thief. But if that same person keeps good association, that tendency for being a thief may be checked. Now, it could be that they'll associate with good people and steal from good people. But they're not going to, in the company of good people, steal with good people, because good people don't steal. So if I can choose, although I have this, due to something in the past, this tendency or propensity, whatever, take any other example, drinking alcohol or something else that's not nice, a lower mode of nature thing. That's due to past, and then I become an alcoholic. So I can become free from, alcoholism. I know people that, Alcoholic Anonymous, and they became free. Somebody became a priest that I know who was, anyway, without details, anecdotal things. It's association. So I can overcome my misfortune due to my past choices by making good choices and by keeping good association. And the bhakti process, according to Bhagavad Gita and the scriptures, bhakti can melt or dissolve all of one's past karma. It has that potency. Just like fire can burn fuel, it has the potency. You just start a fire, and it burns things. You put more fuel in it, and it burns more things. It gets a bigger fire. So the fire of bhakti is such that if I can somehow get connected to bhakti, then the past ill fortune, even good fortune, one becomes situated beyond those karmic bondages because there's another shelter. And if you don't have that other shelter, then you're just like a piece of wood on the sea. The wave goes up and the wave goes down. The wave goes up depending upon which the position of the wave. I'm helpless, at mercy of where the wave is right now. Sometimes up, sometimes down. So that's a free will choice too. Who I associate with, I can choose good association. If there's misfortune or good fortune, I can choose bad association. If there's misfortune or good fortune, those are choices. We're impelled one way or another by past choices, but it's still not taken from you. It's a nice mystery. And if you like to read, I'll refer you to a secular book written by a man who was in a Nazi concentration camp and survived, and wrote a book afterwards about it. His name is Victor. He'll copy it and give it to you later. Viktor Frankl, Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning. Little skinny book. It's real easy to read. It's been reprinted so many times, and it's one of the things he says is one thing cannot be taken from a living being under the most trying of circumstances, and that is the freedom to choose your way. He was in a Nazi concentration camp. There's nothing he could do about it. But he could choose how he's going to deal with the circumstance. That wasn't taken from him. That freedom wasn't taken. A man can be deprived of all freedoms except this one. That's something no one can take. That's one of his statements. And it sustained his life, literally and figuratively both. The detail is, although a Jewish man by profession, he was a psychologist. So what he wanted to do on the other side of the Nazi concentration camp was help people dealing with negative situations that are causes of depression, that overwhelm them, and how to help them get on the other side of it. So he wanted to share his experience and his wisdom that he gained from that tribulation that's more severe than anything anybody's going to undergo. And he became a celebrity. And the others, he wrote the book, and he had a whole school where he taught people how to overcome not the circumstance, but the negativity in response to the circumstance that's outside your control. Some things.
Thank you for answering my question.
Are we okay?
This question is from Sanchari. We are trained to develop a strong intelligence to help us have a healthy spiritual life. How do we trust that we are using the intelligence to guide our decisions and not the mind?
Well, the mind is really strong, and it's, my experience is largely it's the mind that's guiding us, not the intelligence. Largely. But, intelligence, now we're speaking spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is that which will take, according to definition of Bhagavad Gita, 10:10 Bhagavad Gita, is that by which you'll go to Kṛṣṇa. Dadami bodhi yogam tam yena mam upiyanti te. It's that which will take you to Kṛṣṇa. So that's the gold standard, or the litmus test, or whatever the right phrase is. The standard is that which will take you to Kṛṣṇa. And so if it conforms with what Scripture says, then it will help you go to Kṛṣṇa. And if it's dissonant with what Scripture says, it's the mind. Okay. We're good. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.